All right, diving into the history of India today, and wow, are we going deep. We're talking prehistory to independence in 1947, using this YouTube video as our roadmap.
It's a fascinating story, really, with empires rising and falling, religions evolving, and just constant power shifts.
Yeah, that's what I'm excited for. We're talking about ancient cities, huge empires,
Mhm.
those influential figures, and even a connection to the Silk Road.
Right. And it all begins with a bit of a mystery.
Ooh, love those. Tell me more.
Well, let's go back to the Paleolithic age, like way back 400,000 to 200,000 years ago.
Okay, wow.
We find cave paintings, stone tools, these little hints of early humans right on the Indian subcontinent.
That's so cool.
But there's so much we don't know about them. Like their stories, beliefs, daily life. It's all kind of hidden.
It really is like these whispers from the past. Okay, so we have these mysterious early humans.
Yeah.
What's next in the puzzle?
Let's jump to the 3rd millennium BC. We meet the Harappan civilization. Things get complex fast. I mean, these people were ahead of their time, planned cities, a written language we can't even decipher yet, social and economic organization like mind-blowing.
Hold on, planned cities back then. Tell me about those.
Think Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa itself. These were marvels. Sophisticated drainage systems, public baths. They had granaries for food storage, like very advanced for that time. And get this, they were master traders. Networks stretching all the way to Mesopotamia.
Wow, that's incredible. To picture these ancient cities bustling with trade thousands of years ago, what happened to them? Did they just disappear?
That's the big question, isn't it? Around 1500 BC, their cities were abandoned. Theories range from environmental stuff like huge floods, climate change, to maybe an invasion. We don't know for sure.
So the puzzle gets more complex.
It does.
It makes you think about how fragile things can be, even for advanced civilizations.
Definitely something to keep in mind as we go through Indian history.
Okay, so around 1500 BC, the Harappans are out of the picture. What comes next?
Around the same time, you have the arrival of the Vedic Aryans. They bring their language, Sanskrit, and their whole cultural identity to India. And their influence is huge. I mean, you can't talk about India without Hinduism, right?
Yeah.
And those roots, they go right back to the Vedas, these sacred texts of the Aryans.
So the foundation for one of the world's major religions, that's pretty big.
Huge. The Vedas, they give us this glimpse into their beliefs and practices. They emphasize things like dharma, right living, duties, and karma, actions having consequences.
Right, right.
Those ideas, they became the bedrock for this complex belief system that would evolve into Hinduism.
Did they have like a structured social system?
They did. 3 tiers. You had the Brahmins, the priests at the top, then the Kshatriyas, the warriors, and then the Vaishyas, the common people. This hierarchy, it really shapes Indian society.
Okay, interesting. It seems like we're already seeing these themes of social hierarchy and power dynamics. They're kind of recurring.
Oh yeah, for sure. The struggle for power between different groups is something we'll see a lot in Indian history.
Okay, so we have the Vedic Aryans, Hinduism is on the rise, and the social hierarchy is established. What happens next?
As we get to 1000 BC, we see these 16 powerful states, the Mahajanapadas. They're all competing for power. And out of this competition comes a leader from Magadha, Chandragupta Maurya. He's going to change everything.
Ooh, here comes the empire building. Tell me about this Chandragupta. What made him so special?
He was a brilliant strategist and a bit of a ruthless conqueror, to be honest. He unified a lot of northern India, creating the Mauryan Empire. That was the first real imperial power in India. He built this centralized government, had a really formidable army.
So he was the one who brought all these kingdoms and regions together under one banner?
Yeah.
What was the empire like?
The Mauryan Empire, it was a hub of trade, learning, culture. Their capital, Pataliputra, was this magnificent city. You're talking temples, libraries, palaces. They even had a university.
Wow, that's amazing.
Oh, and remember the Silk Road we mentioned? The Mauryan Empire was a major player in that network, connecting India with the whole world.
So not just conquest, but diplomacy and trade, too.
Exactly. They had these strong trade networks, a really efficient government, and of course, that powerful military. It was a really prosperous time, lots of innovation.
This Chandragupta sounds like he was quite a ruler. Did the Mauryan Empire continue after him?
It did. And it's with his grandson, Emperor Ashoka, that things get really interesting. Ashoka, at first, he was like his grandfather, a warrior expanding the empire. But then, after the Kalinga War, he has this huge change of heart.
That seems like a pretty big turning point. What caused the change?
The Kalinga War was just brutal. So much suffering. It really affected Ashoka. He gives up violence, converts to Buddhism, and dedicates himself to peace and social welfare.
From warrior king to pacifist emperor, that's a big shift.
It was. And it had this ripple effect, not just within the empire, but on how Buddhism spread across India and beyond. He had these edicts carved on pillars and rocks everywhere, preaching compassion and tolerance, a really significant moment for Buddhism in India.
Okay, so we've got this powerful empire, this amazing capital, trade is flourishing, and now this major religious shift. Sounds like a golden age.
It was remarkable. But, even empires, no matter how powerful, eventually decline. And the Mauryan Empire, it was no exception.
Oh no, what happened? Invaders, some kind of internal conflict.
Even more dramatic than that, in the 2nd century BC, the last Mauryan ruler assassinated.
No way. By who?
Not a foreign enemy, but by his own commander-in-chief.
Wow, talk about betrayal. So what happened to the empire after that?
Well, the assassination, it marks the beginning of some real instability and fragmentation. The assassin Pushയമitra Shunga he takes over sets up the Shunga dynasty, but their influence, it kind of fizzles out pretty fast.
Okay, so the empire breaks up, new dynasty, but they can't quite fill those big Mauryan shoes, huh? What happens then? Does India just, descend into chaos?
Not really. You got to remember, India was never just one thing. While all this is happening in the north, down south, you've got powerful kingdoms like the Satavahana, the Chera, Chola, Pandya. They're all doing their thing during the classical age.
Right. It's easy to forget that. India wasn't always one big empire, all these different regions with their own cultures and stuff.
Exactly. Like a tapestry, right? All these threads making this complex, rich picture.
I like that analogy. So we got these strong kingdoms down south. Anything happening up north in the meantime?
Well, up north, you get the rise of the Kushanas, a pretty significant kingdom, especially when it came to trade.
Wait, the Kushanas, weren't they big on that Silk Road action we talked about earlier?
Big time players.
Yeah.
The Kushana kingdom, they became this crucial link on the Silk Road, connecting India with the Roman Empire, Persia, even China.
Oh, wow. To think India trading spices and, ideas with Rome all those centuries ago, the world was pretty connected even then.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of connections, you had Kanishka I, their ruler, and he converts to Buddhism.
Another big religious development. Okay, so Buddhism's influence is growing, but what about Hinduism? Was it still around?
For sure. Hinduism, it kept evolving alongside Buddhism.
Yeah.
Important to remember, it wasn't always like one or the other. Lots of overlap, sharing of ideas between them.
That's a good point. So it's not always about replacement, right? Sometimes it's coexistence, influencing each other.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got empires rising and falling, religions spreading, trade routes booming. What's the next chapter in this epic story?
Get ready for another golden age. Because here comes the Gupta Empire. They take over in northern India in the 4th century AD, and it's a period of peace, prosperity, tons of cultural achievements.
Ooh, okay. So if the Mauryan period was India's first big golden age, this is like the sequel. All the art, science, literature, it's all happening again.
Exactly. Big advancements in math, astronomy, medicine. You also get the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, those classic Sanskrit epics compiled during this time. Just an explosion of creativity.
All right, got to add the Gupta period to my must-learn-more list. How'd they manage to create this golden age? Were they all about military expansion?
They were definitely skilled in military strategy, but they also knew how to play the diplomacy game, made alliances. So their empire, it expanded through both military might and smart partnerships.
Sounds like a good time to be alive in the Gupta Empire. But, no empire lasts forever. What brought them down?
Their decline starts in the 5th, 6th centuries AD. And it's largely because of those Huns, remember those guys? Fierce warriors sweeping across empires, causing chaos.
Ah, the Huns, always up to something. So the Gupta Empire falls, and India enters a new era. What's next? What new forces are about to enter the scene?
Well, this is a really big turning point. We're talking about the arrival of Islam.
Okay, now things are getting really interesting. Islam had already spread across huge parts of the world. How did it reach India?
It was a gradual thing, over centuries after the Prophet Muhammad's death. At first, it was raids and conquests along the coast. Then, slowly, they start pushing inland.
So how did the powers that be in India react to this new presence? Was it welcomed or was there resistance?
Oh, there was resistance. You had the Rajputs, those warrior clans. They fought back hard. But in 1192, Muhammad Ghori, this ruler from Central Asia, he defeats them. That was a big power shift.
A major turning point, for sure. So does this mean the beginning of Muslim rule in India?
It does. With the establishment of the Delhi Sultanate in the 13th century, Muslim rule kicks off, and it lasts for centuries. You see these different dynasties, the Slave dynasty, Khilji dynasty, the Tughlaq dynasty, each with their own stories.
I imagine this must have been a period of huge cultural and religious change. Did Islam coming in lead to conflict?
Definitely some challenges and tension as you had these different cultures and religions interacting. The Delhi Sultanate period, it was really a time of upheaval, transformation. Islam brought new religious practices, different styles of art, new ways of life. Huge impact on Indian society.
Fascinating how these different influences just kind of layer on top of each other. Did any particular events or figures from this time stand out?
Oh, so many. The Tughlaq dynasty, for example, they were known for some pretty ambitious, sometimes controversial stuff. You had Muhammad bin Tughlaq, probably one of the most eccentric rulers ever.
Yeah.
He decides to move the capital from Delhi all the way to Daulatabad in the south.
Whoa, wait, really? That sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It was. And then there's Timur's invasion in 1398. Timur, this powerful ruler from Central Asia, he rampages through India, leaving a trail of destruction. The sack of Delhi, especially, was brutal. A really dark chapter for the Delhi Sultanate.
So the Sultanate, they had their internal struggles, external threats. How long did they hold on to power?
The Tughlaq dynasty eventually weakens, and then you have the Sayyid dynasty. But they were dealing with rebellions, instability. Then, the Lodi dynasty, they rule until 1526. Their last ruler, Ibrahim Khan Lodi, he's defeated at the Battle of Panipat. Facing off against, you guessed it, Babur.
Babur, the founder of the Mughal Empire, knew he had to show up eventually. Things are heating up now. Tell me about these Mughals. What kind of empire did they build?
They created, really one of the most magnificent empires in Indian history. Babur, a descendant of Timur, he starts it all. And his successors, they really expand the empire across, most of the subcontinent.
Yeah.
Known for their military, how efficiently they ran things, and just incredible art and architecture.
This is where we get the Taj Mahal, right? Like that iconic Mughal masterpiece.
You got it. The Taj Mahal is a perfect example of their architectural genius. They built all these amazing forts, mosques, gardens, tombs, often blending Persian, Indian, and Islamic styles. It's really unique. And their reign, it also saw this flowering of literature, music, painting. It was a lot.
Sounds like a real golden age for India. Any particular Mughal emperors who were, especially notable?
There are a few. Akbar, for example, he was known for his religious tolerance. Yeah. Really tried to create harmony in this super diverse empire. He abolished the jizya, the tax on non-Muslims, and encouraged dialogue between religions.
Wow, pretty progressive for the 16th century.
He was a visionary, definitely.
Yeah.
His reign is seen as a high point for Mughal rule. And then there's Shah Jahan, the emperor who built the Taj Mahal, remember, as a tribute to his wife, Mumtaz Mahal. He was a huge patron of the arts, oversaw a period of incredible architectural splendor. Lots of beauty.
But even the Mughals, they eventually decline. What happened?
Well, a few things. You had internal rebellions, challenges from groups like the Marathas, they were powerful, and then this new player comes in, the British East India Company.
Oh, right, the British. This is where things take a real turn for India. How did a trading company end up ruling a whole empire?
It's complicated. But basically, they started with trade, right? And then slowly, they exploited the weaknesses in the Mughal Empire and the divisions between different Indian states. They played everyone against each other and just kind of took control bit by bit.
Yeah, I bet that didn't go over so well with a lot of Indians.
You're right. Resentment grew and grew, and it all culminated in the Indian Mutiny of 1857. Some called the First War of Indian Independence. It was this huge uprising. Part of it was sparked by these rifle cartridges. They were greased with animal fat, which was offensive to both Hindus and Muslims.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I can see how that would cause some problems.
I did. And the British, they put down the mutiny pretty brutally.
Yeah.
But it made them rethink things. The East India Company is dissolved, and the British Crown takes direct control.
So India becomes officially a British colony. What was it like for Indians under British rule?
It was a mixed bag, really. The British did introduce some modern things, railroads, telegraphs, a legal system. But their policies, they often favored British interests. There was a lot of poverty, exploitation, discrimination.
Right, and this is where we see the beginnings of the movement for independence, right?
Exactly. That desire for self-rule was there, simmering. And the events of 1857, they just fueled it. You get leaders like Mahatma Gandhi advocating for nonviolent resistance.
Gandhi, such an important figure. What were his strategies in fighting for independence?
Gandhi, he believed in satyagraha and nonviolent resistance. It emphasized truth, love, non-cooperation with unjust laws. He led these huge movements, the non-cooperation movement, the civil disobedience movement, millions of Indians involved, all peacefully protesting, boycotting,
I bet that made the British nervous. Did it have an impact?
big time. Gandhi's approach, it was incredibly effective, put a ton of pressure on the British government. They responded with repression sometimes, concessions other times. But that push for independence, it just kept growing.
So how did India finally achieve independence? Was it like a sudden thing or a process?
It was a long, hard struggle, ups and downs. The Quit India movement during World War II, for example, that was a massive push, but the British cracked down. The war itself, though, it weakened Britain's hold on things, and after the war, the new Labour government in Britain, they were more sympathetic to India's goals.
So after centuries under foreign rule, India finally breaks free. What a moment.
It was a huge turning point. August 15, 1947, India becomes a free nation. The end of the British Empire and the start of something new. But the road to independence, it wasn't simple.
What do you mean?
The partition of India, splitting into India and Pakistan, it was really traumatic. Lots of violence, people displaced. It left a scar, a moment of celebration, but also of sorrow.
Bittersweet, for sure. We've covered so much ground, ancient civilizations to modern India. It's been quite a journey. What's next for India?
Well, building a new nation after so long under colonial rule, that's a massive challenge. India had so many issues to deal with: poverty, illiteracy, social inequality, and then creating a unified identity from this incredibly diverse population.
It's like trying to put together this giant puzzle with all these different pieces, right?
Exactly. And to make things even more complex, they decided to be a democracy, which was a bold move, right? For a new nation with such a huge, diverse population.
So did it work? Did democracy take hold?
It did. It wasn't always smooth sailing. There were times of instability, economic problems, social unrest.
Mm-hmm.
But that commitment to democracy, it stayed strong. They had free and fair elections, a strong civil society, a court system that upheld the law.
That's pretty impressive. What about their economy? How did they develop after independence?
For a long time, India followed this socialist model, focused on the state running things, heavy industries. But by the 90s, they started opening up, embracing free market ideas, foreign investment, that kind of thing.
So a shift from socialism to more of a capitalist approach?
Yeah, and it was a game changer. The economy just boomed, became one of the fastest growing in the world, and they became a big player in the global IT industry. Bangalore, they call it the Silicon Valley of India, this hub for tech innovation.
Wow. From struggling with poverty to a global economic force. Amazing. What about India's role in the world? How has that changed?
India has always been big on promoting peace, what they call non-alignment in international affairs. During the Cold War, they led the non-aligned movement, stayed independent from both the U.S. and the Soviet Union.
So they didn't pick sides in that whole global power struggle.
Nope. They focused on their own interests. They also became a voice for developing nations, pushing for a fairer world.
Where does India stand on the world stage today?
In the 21st century, they're a rising power. Their economy is growing, the population is young, dynamic, and, like we said, their democracy is vibrant. They're key players in organizations like the UN, the G20, and they're more assertive in their foreign policy.
It's incredible to see how far they've come, from ancient times to this modern nation making its mark on the world. What a journey, and I bet there's so much more to learn about India.
Oh, absolutely. I encourage you to explore what really interests you. There's always something new to discover about India's past. It's endless, really.
It really makes you think. India is often called a land of contrasts, right? Where ancient traditions mix with modern goals. That duality, I wonder how that shaped India and how it'll impact their future. Something to think about as you keep exploring this fascinating nation. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the history of India.